Good morning and welcome to our second on the Couch series for the Caddyshack project for 2022. This morning we are joined by Liz Dore and Maguire from Relationships and Private Stuff to discuss sex and relationships for people with a disability. We would like to begin today's session by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land upon which we all meet, which this morning is literally across Australia. I'm joining you from beautiful Yuin country on the south coast of New South Wales. The Caddyshack project, Liz and Jan would all like to acknowledge the traditional custodians and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. We welcome all Aboriginal people online with us this morning, and we all recognise that sovereignty was never ceded. This is, was, and always will be Aboriginal land. So thank you for joining us. We have a very exciting session ahead for you this morning. What we will acknowledge from the outset is that this is a topic that a lot of people online today are very passionate about. Myself, Liz and Jan more so, and I'm very excited to be having this discussion today. There's not a lot that we can discuss in an hour, and this is really just the tip of the iceberg. And we've had some fantastic questions also come in from people who have registered to be online with us this morning. So really hoping to get to those questions. What we will do, as we always do as a follow-up to these webinar series, is provide you with a lot of resources and links to further information at the end of the session. So if something comes up for you through today's session, feel free to drop us a question in the chat box. If we don't have time to get to it, please feel free to email us after the session and we will get to it. We definitely want to be able to share as much information with you all as possible. So I'll kick off this morning by introducing Jan and Liz. As most of you know, my name is Naomi Viret and I'm a health promotion officer at the Caddyshack project as part of the Illawarra Shoalhaven Local Health District. I also have my colleagues Jen Farinella and Maddie Stratton online with us this morning. Liz and Jan are both here representing Relationships and Private Stuff this morning. So Liz has been working with people to help them achieve their educational, employment and personal goals for over 25 years. This includes 10 years experience in counselling and education. The focus of her counselling has been to support clients develop meaningful relationships and a positive awareness of their sexuality. With more than 15 years experience in providing training in relationships and sexuality to people with a disability, also their family members and support staff. In Liz's words, people on the autism spectrum with disability or brain injury face the same issues as other people when it comes to relationships. Friendship is important. The desire to love and to be loved, whether as a friend or as an intimate companion, is a drive that defines a person in a way that no disability ever can. People with a disability need to gain the skills and the rules that help them to form these relationships and as such have positive impacts on the lives of these people. Jan has been working with Relationships and Private Stuff since 2011, initially in an administration role and volunteering at events. This over time led to Jan becoming the centre manager and now too provides counselling. In her role as centre manager, she has spoken with many clients, families, support workers, as well as Department of Community and Justice and police. These interactions fueled a passion in her work to do more to educate and support people with a disability and those around and supporting them. She has been an accidental counsellor for many years, even in other industries prior to her work with Relationships and Private Stuff. As a parent of a person with a disability who is navigating and managing the NDIS funding system themselves, you can recognise that Jan is a very experienced person in this field as well. Jan has been is also still a support worker at the Lotus Project in Adelaide, working in day programs for adults, kids, weekend programs, and in-home support and short-term accommodation options. Jan is a service user, a provider, and supports others who has a good understanding of the importance of the various roles that people have and how their own beliefs, fears, and values impact clients in both positive and not so positive ways, particularly when it comes to talking about sexual health and relationships. So I'd like to get kicked off this morning, Liz, by first asking you, You've been working with people with a disability for quite some time now, and your work is helping to achieve their educational, employment, and personal goals. The main focus of your counselling has been to support the clients to develop meaningful relationships and develop positive awareness around their sexuality. Are you able to tell us what got you into this field of work and what it is that's driving you to do this work on a daily basis?
I had an uncle with Down syndrome, so that was probably the beginning of my experience. I then was a school teacher and had that experience of a range of children, but within that there were children with disabilities. So I went back and did special education, and then, you know, one thing leads to another and you move for different reasons like love, and there's not a special education job. So I got a group home job and worked with adults with disability. So I started seeing the whole range, and that moved on to employment and community integration, which was finding out what someone was passionate about, which is still a key, and finding a group where they could join other people and meet that the need for people in their lives. If they love singing, it was finding a choir, which I'd still recommend so it can increase people's friendship circle.
Excellent. It really sounds like, Liz, in those years of working across the different sectors within disability, just recognising the gaps and needs that particularly existed around the relationships and a person developing their sexuality and being able to express that. And I'm really excited to be able to explore that a little bit further with you as we go through the session this morning to identify what those gaps have been and how it is that relationships and private stuff and other services out there have really worked to address that. And Jan, how about yourself? You've worked along Liz for quite some time now. Are you able to share with us your passion and what it is that has brought you to this role?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everybody. It wasn't something I ever expected. I came into this quite late in life. I'm 60 in a couple of weeks, so it's come later. I had a corporate and hairdressing background before that. But through working with Liz, a bit like her, I started to develop an understanding of the different needs and areas that were lacking, you know, for our clients and the support that they need. And I guess I used to have a level of sympathy for people with disability, but not really having a level of empathy where you understand what it might be like to be in their shoes. You know, sympathy is not really enough. It tends to come from a place of feeling pity for someone, and I don't think that's how we should approach our clients. They deserve rich, rewarding lives like we all hope to achieve. So yeah, that's how my journey sort of went from doing a little bit of volunteer work to gradually moving along to counselling, and now I'm doing that down in Adelaide, just trying to spread that knowledge a little bit more.
Excellent. It's so good to hear, and to hear of an organisation that literally has been able to go around Australia now. It's really fantastic to hear. And I really like that point that you made, Jan, around the difference between sympathy and empathy when it comes to working with our clients who may be experiencing disability, and it's all many ranges and forms. And I think that's a really key point for us to keep in the back of our minds today too. Why wouldn't we be sharing our education, information and resources with our clients with disability the same way in which we would be sharing that information with all of our clients? And that indeed that education, it's such an empowering thing and it's so essential to the lives of these people. So Jan, I'd like to continue on with yourself. We understand that one of the main areas of concern that you come across in the work that you're doing regularly is despite coming from a really genuine place of caring, families and carers often don't fully understand a client's rights and helping them to achieve their goals, I guess, particularly when it comes to that of relationships. Are you able to elaborate on that a little bit more, how it is that they can be supporting the person in their care to achieve those outcomes?
Sure. I think that the biggest trap that people who support people with disability fall into is being overprotective. You know, throughout a child's life, we have to make a lot of decisions on their behalf, you know, make the choices for them. And it can be a little bit hard to let go because, as you said, we're genuinely caring about them and we're concerned about their welfare and we're worried about that big scary world out there. But I think we really need to allow them the opportunities to make choices for themselves, become more autonomous, rather than us doing everything for them, so that they can truly be as independent as possible. You know, I recognise that they'll always need a level of support, most clients, but what that level of support or how that support's delivered can be quite different to that sort of trap we fall into of just overprotecting.
And I really love that word that you've brought up in terms of autonomy and being autonomous, and the fact that we can present a range of options to somebody and work through that decision-making process with them and allow them to make those choices for themselves. And I really love that word. So thanks for sharing that, Jen. I guess, as you said, it's sometimes difficult for parents, carers, support workers not to be overprotective. And I guess it's also that sense of building a little bit of resilience as well, and that is an important life skill for all of us. I think also, as you mentioned, that sometimes there's that miscommunication about what the person's needs might be, or that overprotection. And obviously that causes a lot of stress for everybody involved. Are there examples that you can think of where those the stresses or not being able to provide a person with the information and being overprotective have potentially then led to behaviours, particularly around their sexual expression, that are perhaps seen as undesirable behaviours?
Yeah, you know, when I say overprotection, a lot of that revolves around actually not giving our clients the knowledge they need to understand behaviours and what's acceptable, what's legal.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, unfortunately, as you mentioned before, I often speak to police and the Department of Communities and Justice, and that's because somebody hasn't been given that education and knowledge and has found themselves in a pretty tricky situation where they might have exposed themselves in public, or, you know, not understood consent,
Yes.
areas like that. And they find themselves in quite a bit of hot water. And what we try to do is prevent that from happening in the first place. And I think it's really important to give these, I'll say kids, you know, because it sort of starts back early, give them that education and knowledge, and recognise that they are going to have sexual desires. They will want to form relationships. They might want to get married and have children one day. And we can't just bury our heads in the sand and think that that's not going to happen, you know, and then when it does happen, it usually, you know, comes out all in the wrong way, you know.
Yeah, and I really like that Jen, you refer back to that importance of that education and from a young age. And I can imagine that in some instances it can be difficult for families or carers to provide the information in an age or stage relevant way and think, what is it that they're going to actually do with this information? But like you say, it's important so that they're then taking that information and having a bit better understanding around those behaviours and understanding the difference between what's acceptable in a public space versus in a private space, for example. And just one example I have of a client who I worked with in a counselling role many years ago was that because they'd always been told wrong, no, dirty, inappropriate, they weren't given the skills and resources that they needed to manage, as you say, those thoughts, feelings and desires in an appropriate way. So their sexual expression then came out via a foot fetish, for example. And I know that that's something that we might touch on a little bit later on too, around the importance of providing that education in a meaningful and positive way so that we don't then have those potential negative consequences where they end up in trouble with the police, for example, as you've said, Jan. So I'd like to move on now to talking about parents and carers and how we're able to support those roles. Liz, it makes sense that parents and carers are often overwhelmed with these discussions, and particularly when their young person may have a disability or an acquired brain injury, and the education may be harder to provide than in other situations. I think it's also true that many have faced challenges and, as Jan mentioned before, have had to make decisions for their young person as they've grown and developed. And now that they're sort of reaching teens or early adulthood, and we're trying to provide some of that autonomy and allowing them to make some of those choices for themselves. I can imagine that when, you know, puberty hits, it's sort of almost that sense of, oh no, here we go again. Like, we just felt we'd gotten on top of things, and now we throw hormones into the mix and sexual thoughts and desires, and here we go again. How is it that parents can best educate, or carers can best educate the people in their care, particularly when it comes to their personal development and then moving into relationships and thinking about sexual health?
What helps is thinking about the development, and it is a bit harder because other children just pick it up, or at school they get enough information. They also know where to get information, which is why family planning have developed some good resources. And when I worked there, I was able to connect the issues that were happening with my clients to the need for some resources. So family planning is a good place to start, because if you want to talk about puberty, then it's got resources that you can use. And I'll just share my screen so I can just show you a couple. So the body parts, really, it's essential that they know them. What if someone actually touches their penis or their vagina? They actually need to know mum and dad aren't going to shy away from them using the real words.
Yes.
So a penis is a penis, balls, testicles, and vagina and bottom, and so on. And the public and the private is so important. If someone's on a bus and is attracted to feet, or sees a young woman with the boobs, with the low neck top, and then his penis is going to stand up in his pants. It's just a reality. And for the other young teenagers, they know to cross their legs, put their bag on their on top of their pants to cover it up, or think about something else. They just usually get that, but we actually need to teach that when you go through puberty, you're going to have sexy feelings, your penis is going to stand up, or if you're a girl, then you're going to get tingly feelings. So where can you touch yourself? Well, that's when you talk about public and private. And you don't really want them putting their hands down their pants when they feel aroused at school. So it's better not to say, stop that, stop that. It's better to say, not here, you can do that at home here or here. And I even recommend a pump pack of lubricant, because usually boys find that it feels better if they rub some cream or lubricant on it, particularly lubricant or oil. And so if they're having a really pleasant time in their bedroom and they're ejaculating in their bedroom after they've had wet dreams, then they're less likely to do it at school on the bus, because hey, if they've done it the night before or that morning, then that's going to relax them.
Great strategies, Liz. And I think also just the use of those visual tools to be able to assist with that education too. And you could even use pictures of their own home environment, or public
definitely.
places that they might usually attend, to really get that message home. And again, it's not saying, no, stop it, that's not okay. It's just saying, not in this context, but it's okay in your private spaces, and encouraging that, which is great. That's a great tip. Thanks so much, Liz. Jen, often when it comes to themes around sex and sexual health, and also relationships, parents or carers might lose sight of who the client actually is. And I suppose I'm thinking a lot here about potentially carers in group home environments, for example. Do you have any advice for carers to help them manage the divide that might exist between the client's needs and desires and what the family's values are, or what it is that they would like for the person who they're related to?
Sure. It's really important to remember who the client is here. That's the main focus, particularly as a support worker. You need to advocate for your client. And that can be difficult if the family has different values to the client's values. You know, you think about it, when kids grow up, they quite often reflect their parents' values and beliefs and everything. And then as they get a little bit older, they start to question that and develop their own values and beliefs. And they can often be very different to what the parents want and wish for their child and believe. You know, for example, in the area of homosexuality, things like that, you know, that can be quite an issue. And I think with support workers, they do need to advocate for their client, but along the way, they also need to listen to the family and their concerns and not alienate them from the process. The family is usually, and not in all cases, but usually a big part of the client's life as well. And to help them understand that you're not just encouraging the client to just go off and do things dangerously and just do whatever they like, but that you're trying to educate them and give them knowledge to make those informed, healthy choices that sit well with their values. And it can be difficult at times. We come across it all the time in our service, but it's something that you have to keep reminding yourself of who the client is and who you're really working for. You know, NDIS is funding the client, not the parents. And we want those clients to you know, have rich, full lives that reflect what they want, what their values are. So, but you can't alienate the parents and just say, well, this is how it is. That's not fair either.
And I think what I'm really getting from what you're saying there, Jan, is it's about communication. It's about everybody being on the same page and communicating the needs of the person and, you know, understanding how everybody is feeling about it, but trying to mutually come to some type of agreement. And I acknowledge this morning that we might have some clients online as well as carers. Do you have any advice to the clients themselves in how they might be able to bring up these conversations with their carers or with their family members?
Just be straight up with it, you know, say, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I want, how can I make this happen? You know, when you set goals, there's steps to those goals usually. It's not just a case of just going straight there. So you really need to sit down with them and be honest with them about how you're feeling, and also as a client, recognise how your family might feel about it as well. You know, and try and understand why they feel that way, but try and be strong and use your support worker to support you in getting there, really.
Great advice.
But again, it's communication.
Absolutely. Great advice. Thank you so much, Jan. And I know we did also have a question from one of the registrators this morning, just in terms of if the client that they're working with is potentially non-verbal, what sort of strategies would you use with those types of clients in especially talking about things around consent or trying to get a better understanding of what their sexual needs may be? Do you have any tips or skills around that you might be able to share with us, Liz or Jan?
Do you want to start first, Liz?
Yeah, and I will. There's a few resources like teacher bodies, and I have man, woman, and then a teenager. And so I encourage people that are non-verbal to actually take their clothes off. And then you can ask them to point to the teenager, point to the adult man, and then point to his penis or his dick. So you're assessing which parts of the body he knows, and then you can, you know, look at those drawings of children, teenagers and adults and trying to get them to identify where they're at. And again, whether they're non-verbal or not, they're still going to have sexy feelings. So using some of the resources which will be on the list at the end that you'll send out, some of those DVDs you can now buy online and watch online, and I'd really recommend those as well.
Excellent, thank you.
I just want to point out that Liz meant take the clothes off the teacher body, not the client take their clothes off. Just in case anyone misunderstood what you were saying there.
They should be teaching them in real life when they're bathing them when they're 5
as well.
Watch the bottom, but no, in the counselling room or in the lounge room office, no.
Good clarification, thank you. And Jan, I guess just to expand a little bit more around having a really clear understanding about the client is, I know that there's some terms that we quite often use, which are duty of care that the carer or parent may have versus dignity of risk. Are you able to explain the difference between those two terms for us and why it's so important when we're working in this field?
Sure. I mean, I imagine most people listening know what duty of care means. And we kind of, in a way, we say dignity of care versus weighing that up against dignity of risk. And dignity of risk is allowing a person to look at a situation, make some calculations, weigh up the pros and cons, weigh up the risks, and look at different ways of how can I make myself safer when I'm, making these choices, and allowing them to make those little mistakes along the way. We let our kids without disability often get that opportunity to make little mistakes along the way and learn those life skills. We're not given a book when we're kids that says, these are the life skills you need to know, off you go. We learn it by making mistakes, and allowing our clients that dignity of risk to make those mistakes is really actually a part of our duty of care. So it's almost not a versus thing, really. It's actually part of the duty that we have to our clients. So yeah, just letting them learn from those little mistakes, but giving them the knowledge so they're not big mistakes that hugely impact their life or put them in dangerous situations. Yeah.
I really like that example. That really helps. Thank you. And I think it comes down to, as you say, again, it's providing that information. And as health promotion officers, we're always coming from a harm minimisation perspective. And so it's how can we minimise the harm that may be involved in these behaviours, and allowing those opportunities. Because I know that a lot of people, particularly in group homes, for example, or to have support workers come into the home, they often feel like there's not a lot of private time, that there's always somebody else around. And so finding moments where they can have those private times in the bathroom or the bedroom become really important as well. And so, like you said before, not overprotecting, but giving really good opportunities of time and windows of time where those things can be explored, and taking a harm minimisation approach. I really like it. Thank you.
Particularly when you look at parents, we're all aging, and there will come a time when you're not there to protect your child.
Yes.
And that's going to leave them very vulnerable if you don't give them those life skills.
Yes, I agree. And I think that's true of everybody, not just clients with disability too. Yeah. So Liz, in terms of the overprotection of the client, and I guess particularly when it comes to sex education, talking about sexuality and relationships, it can end up leaving the client very vulnerable to sexually transmissible infections, unplanned pregnancy, and potential sexual abuse. Are you able to elaborate on that a little bit more, and perhaps provide some information on ways that we can encourage this education so that we're potentially avoiding these undesirable effects from happening for these people?
Well, education is power, and I think the biology and the social need to be taught at the same time. So you're teaching the body parts and where you can touch yourself and masturbation, which the others are doing, as I said before, and allowing someone to have lube in the bedroom is not going to make them masturbate more. It's just going to make it more pleasurable and teach them that that's a place to do it. And then if you're doing the social skills side by side and letting them make friends and joining groups, as I said before, then, if there's two that get on really well at the choir, then they could change phone numbers. If they're non-verbal, it's pretty obvious to see which ones like each other. So if they're non-verbal, then the staff or the family can help them go out to the park and, just walk around, look at the pond and the ducks and stuff, and observe how they're interacting. If one is touching the other too much in public, then it's a sign that that person's attracted, but it's also a teachable moment. And I just want to show this screen again, because I have a series of photos, and that's where I I teach the difference between strangers and then also acquaintances. So once you've been to that group or activity, you're not girlfriend, boyfriend, you're just acquaintances. So you just know their name. You're not boyfriend, girlfriend yet. But at that group, you could become friends, so that if they learn the difference between these steps, and also this is a fairly simple way of teaching them to ask each other questions and to take in turns. So if you teach that socially, then hopefully if they form an intimate relationship, they'll also be, taking in turns to talk about what they want. And I have had clients ring someone too much, but then I've talked to them and shown them this. And once they get the understanding that if they ring more often, it's harassment, then they get the turn taking. There's also, if they're going on a date, then public places is ideal. A staff member or mum or dad could sit outside the cafe and they could go in, so they actually get a bit of privacy, and learning to pay half the bill means that you don't owe that guy anything if he keeps paying you something. So I always think having your own key card is a safety that you're teaching right in the beginning. And they might want to kiss in the park, but if not the park, it's an environment that you need to support them. And if that's their home, and there's a lounge room where you can just leave them be, then that would be really good. I've been working with two people who met at a workshop, and they've been through the process of changing phone numbers. Their families are so supportive that it's lovely to see that they have supported them with the dating, and now they are visiting each other's homes. And initially that was during the day. So they gave them the space to do that. And I think that really helps with those dating steps. And then at the same time, you're moving along with the sexuality and talking about consent and do they really want a baby, because that's really expensive and babies cry a lot and it can be really demanding. And then that's when I talk about contraception, it's illegal to have a person sterilized without their consent. Now there's Implanon, which some of my clients are on, or the pill, but they need to see all of those options, and doctors have them in a kit. Family planning is a great place to go because they've learnt how to show that kit to people with disability.
Excellent. Some really great tips and advice there, Liz. And I think, the popularity increasing on shows with your Dateables, for example, and we've seen the series Love on the Spectrum, it's really helping to normalize that within society too, that you may see people out on dates, and how great it is that we've been able to encourage and empower those people to be able to share those experiences the same as their peers, which I just think is such a wonderful thing. And Liz, I guess just to expand on that a little further and moving into talking about education and the experiences of some of the clients that you've seen, sadly we do know that people who experience, particularly an intellectual disability, experience more abuse, but also anxiety and depression, particularly when it comes to things like dating and being in relationships. Are you able to expand on that a little bit more and just, I guess, give us a bit of a heads up as to why it is that this group of people in particular might be more at risk of abuse or harassment?
If somebody's lonely, then that's going to make them more vulnerable, because if a staff member or a priest or someone, leading the choir, or if that person wants to touch a person with a disability that's lonely, then they could be taken advantage of. But if you've helped someone have these sort of relationships, then this woman here, if someone tries to touch her, has got a boyfriend, and they're more likely to go, no, I've got a boyfriend. Or even the information about stop, go away. And I get my clients in a workshop to actually stand up out of your seat. And if someone's trying to touch you and you don't like it, you say, no, go away. And if you were at home or in a group home, then one person can be demonstrating and then say to mum, look, you go out now, let's see if she can say it loud enough so that you hear. So if it happens wherever it happens, but people with disabilities are often told to sit down, do this, do that, keep quiet. And so if they're being told to sit down and keep quiet, then how are they going to stand up for themselves? And with the knowledge, you hope that they know, oops, this is the touching and I don't like it.
And I think you touched on a really interesting point there, Liz, around the compliance. So that people with disability a lot of the time will say yes to things because of that compliance. And that obviously then becomes an issue when it comes to this unwanted sexual touch or, you know, when it comes to talking about consent. So I think, yeah, you've raised a really good point there for us to remember around the compliance of these people in general and being able to say it's okay to say no and to stop, and I don't like that particular behaviour.
And also in gay relationships, people with disabilities are also same-sex attracted. And again, that's something that needs to be acknowledged. And they have the right to a same-sex attractive relationships. And I've had clients that have had them. But if they're not allowed to have those, and again, that they could be taken advantage of. So I think it is good to let them join groups that are for same-sex attracted people.
Excellent. Really good advice, Liz. Thank you. And we've sort of touched on it, and I really like how you've given some examples of how people can be supported in entering into these meaningful relationships, and particularly intimate ones. Is there any other tips or tricks that you'd like to give to any clients who are online with us this morning around engaging with like-minded others, or how they might go about starting a relationship, and particularly looking for an intimate relationship if that's what they're after?
Well, as I said before, I think it's really important to join an interest group. So if you like singing, find a choir. And if you go each week, you will start getting to know the people in the choir and you'll make friends. And that can, you know, turn out to be meeting up on the weekend. And that could be one day it could be a relationship, or it might just be a friendship. One guy collects Matchbox cars, and I wasn't sure about that, but apparently there's hobby groups for everyone who collects. So I'm now encouraging him to find a Matchbox car hobby group. So that I'd strongly recommend, but also making sure you've got the education and around sex, consent, and safe sex, so that if you get to that point after the dating, that you're aware the other person might want sex before you, and that's important to talk about. I'm just ready for kisses and hugs at the moment, and let's stay in the lounge room.
And I think that's one of the things I like to refer to is almost that parallel practice. Like, imagine if you find yourself in this situation, how might you feel and what might you say, and where are you feeling in terms of your comfortability, and being able to practice some of those conversations are really important. Jen, I know that you spoke before about people wanting their autonomy, and we see that a lot in areas of things like study, employment, living independently. And you mentioned about setting goals for clients to work towards. Are you able to explain a little bit more in terms of autonomy around these relationships, and particularly expressing those sexual thoughts, feelings and desires, and what a goal might look like for a client, just as an example?
Yeah, I think, as I said before, achieving a goal usually involves smaller goals. along the way. I want to buy a mansion by the sea. Okay, well, how am I going to do that? I need to get a job. I need to earn money. I need to save money, and da, 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 da. So I think sometimes goals can be way too vague, and I often use, I think it's good to write them down and actually ask yourself certain questions. So I'll just share my screen and show you this here. Where are we? Back up here. One of the systems that counsellors quite often use is the SMART Goals worksheet. This is the one I'm showing now, is the one that you can find online for free.
I can't see your screen, Jen. You might just need to click on share, Dol.
I did share. Let me try again. Okay, let's see. Let's share screen. Oh, there we are. Sorry, I clicked the wrong thing there.
It's okay.
Okay, let me bring this back up again. Here we are.
Perfect, thanks.
Right, thanks. Sorry about that. Yeah, so this is the typical SMART goals sheet that I think was probably the original, but I've actually picked up this one along my way through study, and I like this one a bit more because it does make you look at, be specific about the goal. Is it measurable? Is it achievable? And so on. But it also makes you question what the potential obstacles are and what those solutions might be to that and who can help you with that. So I think using sheets like this sometimes, you know, with a lot of our clients, it's good to use visual tools and sort of so that it's just easier for them to absorb and retain. Otherwise, it can be a bit airy-fairy, you know, like, oh, I want to give up smoking. Yeah, well, we all want to give up smoking, but how am I actually going to do that? And maybe setting yourself a bit of a timeline too as to when you hope to achieve it, when you're going to start it, how often are you going to do this particular practice or whatever. So I think it's really important to use sheets like this sometimes.
Excellent. And I really like that you say, as you say, this one takes it sort of to that next level in terms of how we're going to start to take that action. And I know that as society in general, we've become very automated and like we want something, we want it right now. And that delayed gratification can be very difficult for people. So to be able to see that, you know, yes, we're working towards this goal, but unfortunately it's not just going to happen overnight for you. There are things that need to happen along the way. That's a great reminder for all of us. I think that instant gratification doesn't always happen. We've got to be patient and wait for these things. So thanks for sharing that visual with us, Jan. Really appreciate it. I think it's a really nice time for us to have a chat about the experience you've had in your TV program, the Dateables, Liz, and really being able to set up safe environments for young people in particular to start these social connections with a view to dating and with a view to intimate relationships. And I know that over your many years of experience working with clients, you've obviously seen situations where providing the information and education has been done really well, and other situations where potentially it hasn't been done so well, and therefore it may have led to more negative consequences for the client. Are you able to share some experiences with those of us online this morning, just to give some examples about how this can be done really well, and I guess some potential flags for what not to do in providing this education and information?
Well, as I said, it's important to do both at the same time, the relationships and the sexuality. And just think back to your own experiences. And as Jan said, the timeline is important. I actually do that visually. So with photos or on a big art pad where I ask them what they want in the future. And then you can actually put those other photos or drawings in between. So they don't think they can just get married, you know, this year. And I have had the experience of people dating and then it not going anywhere, a couple being engaged and then breaking up, and then, as you'll hear from the short film, a couple that have been together over 10 years, and then more recently a couple who've only been going out for 4 to 6 months and are so in love. And that's really lovely to see. So all of these experiences are just, they're exciting, but don't think just because one couple breaks up that that's it, or one guy's too controlling. Use it as a teachable moment, and talk about, well, at least you picked that he was the wrong person, or now you know a bit about what you're looking for, and use it to move forward and go back to the friendship phase, so you're not using it as a negative thing.
Yeah, and I really like that you keep coming back to that term, teachable moment. So we often refer to that in health promotion. What are the teachable moments? What are those points in time where we can have a really meaningful discussion with somebody and say, well, this is what happened, or this is what being in a relationship is like. And not many relationships go all the way, but as you said, it's about acknowledging what you do want in a relationship so that you're able to better look for that next time. And the fact that if we're using that parallel practice and having those discussions, we might say, you know, the relationship might end, and these are some of the thoughts or feelings that you might have around that, and just being able to prepare somebody for what those outcomes may be. But I really look forward to seeing this little film in a moment of someone being together for 10 years, because I just feel that that's so special and something definitely to be celebrated. So just a little bit more in terms of being able to provide some resources or tips for both clients and carers, parents online this morning. Jen, how is it that carers can best equip themselves to talk about things like body parts, sex and other private stuff? I know that we've already spoken about a couple of the resources this morning, but when we speak about that education as power, how do we give that power and control back to the clients around their sexuality, and letting them know that it's okay, for example, to masturbate, but in a private space? Is there any additional resources other than what's already been discussed that you might recommend or suggest?
Well, as we keep saying, visual resources I think are so important, and not just talking. And frequently my go-to when it comes to relationships and sex is the family planning resources. They have an awful lot online in New South Wales that are disability related, designed specifically for that community. And I'll just show you a couple of examples. Like they have their sex and safe and fun guide, and there's a support person's guide there too to help you navigate how to deliver the information. And as you can see, it's very easy English, simple pictures. You know, good sex can be fun, it can be by yourself, it can be in a private place, and so on. They then look at bad sex, and, you know, playing with yourself in public is against the law, for example. Sexual harassment is against the law, and so on. So if you were delivering it, like, I laminate these pictures and show the client the picture, and I will say to them things like, I've got on the screen here, this man and woman like each other very much. You know, they might want to kiss and cuddle. They're by themselves in the bedroom with the door closed, and so on. And then you would follow up later on with questions, just reinforcing that knowledge and how much did the client absorb? What do you think's happening in the picture? How can you tell they both want to touch each other? You know, they're smiling, and so on. You know, you can do that type of thing. With bad sex, you know, we've got a girl masturbating on the lounge here. So you would say she's in a public place. This is bad sex. The other people are angry and annoyed. And again, follow up with those questions to just see how much the client has absorbed. And you might have to go back to this first area of education to fill the gaps that aren't answered correctly here. Again, they've got very simple resources about how to put on a condom and how important it is to tear the packet open, rather, you know, on the zigzag side rather than with your teeth. You risk breaking the condom, all those types of things. When it comes to relationships, I found this guide particularly useful because it does go through those steps of relationships. It explains the different types of relationships, the skills, how to form your relationships, how to grow them. And as Liz was saying before, you know, you might join a group and meet somebody, you might become friends, you might become more romantically involved, but often it's through those friends that you meet other friends, and so on, and then you meet the person you're going to fall in love with. It's not always going to be in that group, but through those common interests you're meeting like-minded people. So I think the combination of that practical experience and then backing it up with tools like this is really valuable. And I encourage people to just Google. It's amazing what is out there. I mean, I find these particularly good, but Shine SA have resources as well, which is kind of family planning in South Australia. I'm sure that True in Queensland does. WA Health have some good resources. They're not necessarily designed for people with disability, but they do teach parents how to talk to people about sex and things like that. So just get online and have a look at what's around. But I would recommend some of the ones by Family Planning and Shine and places like that, because that's their main focus.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks so much, Jen. And I think that really helps the array of client group that we're potentially working with as well. And I think that being able to use those pictorial images can help with our nonverbal clients as well, and being able to use that expression by being able to point out things on the pictures too, which is fantastic. So Liz, just to touch on some of the terminology, because I know that today we spoke about sometimes the language that we use is really important around this. So instead of saying things are wrong, dirty, disgusting, no, don't do that, I guess coming to an end, are you able to give us some language that's really positive that we can use in this space and that we can take away from today and start practicing?
Well, I think it's important to use the correct names, but also the nicknames. And as I was saying before, being really specific about what you're allowed to do, which is similar to others. So you don't touch your penis or your dick when we're in the car. You wait till you're at home in your bedroom, close the door. So just use the language that other people are, and find out what they're using. I mean, dick was what they called it when I was at school, but find out whatever name they're using now, and use those so they know you're comfortable. And so if someone touches it, they know to tell you. So just give them the positive messages around what other people their age should be doing.
That's great.
And I would say don't use those kind of baby names that, those sort of silly names that people like to use sometimes for things, because if a person is trying to tell someone that someone's touched them inappropriately, it's really handy that they can be specific and say, they touched my vagina, not my wah-wah or whatever. So you know exactly what they mean. But again, as Liz said, also, combine that with the more sort of casual terminology that we use, like dick and balls and words like that. But I think it is really important that they know the proper names.
Absolutely.
For situations like that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think if we just take a sex positive approach, and as we've said multiple times today, everybody has sexual thoughts, feelings and desires and has a right to be able to explore that. And so if we come back to that sex positive language, providing education as empowerment to therefore reduce the harm that may be associated with some of these behaviours, we're already taking really good steps in the right direction to being able to support these people in our lives. So I think that's really important. I recognise that we are coming up to 11 o'clock very quickly. I think one of the last things that I'd just like to touch really quickly on, Liz and Jan, is that the NDIS, or the National Disability Insurance Scheme, has now been out for a number of years, and there are ways that the system has been able to support people with a disability and exploring relationships and sexual health. Are you able just to give a quick heads up as to how that scheme has supported people with disability around those topics, and what it is that clients or carers may be able to look into to support their sexual needs?
Well, there's a number of things, starting with support workers helping them meet people and make friends. And then there's funding available for them to attend group workshops on friendship and relationship skills, and that way they can practice. And then there's the one-on-one sexuality sessions where the quiz or assessment is done to work out how much they know. So NDIS covers each of those. Then they'll cover the sessions for the education. NDIS now also covers sex work. So for those people who wanted that, it's better to actually put it on the agenda and talk about it, rather than them just find a massage parlour that doesn't know how to work with people with disability. You want, if you're going to see a sex worker, that sex worker to know exactly how to ask someone for consent, and also to realise that it is being a paid service and that NDIS paid for it, not a free girlfriend experience.
And also NDIS provide funding so that people like us can also see the support people around the client to give them the education and strategies to support what we're doing with the clients. So we don't just see clients, we encourage the families to get involved, the support workers to get involved and help them, show them the resources they can use and the strategies they can use to help the client and support them to their best, rather than just being, because we only see the client for an hour a fortnight maybe or whatever. They're there the rest of the time.
And I think you really touched on a good point there, Jen, because again, it comes down to that communication, doesn't it? And having that multi-pronged approach and having all significant parties of that person's life being involved in those decisions and coming to a mutual agreement that's best for the client's needs to be met. So thank you for that. And we'll also provide some resources around that in the follow-up email too. I want to thank you both, Liz and Jan, for being online with us this morning. You're both a wealth of information and knowledge, and just a reminder that, you know, we could talk about this for weeks and days on end, but unfortunately we only have an hour this morning. So we will provide a series of follow-up resources, and if you have any questions, please direct them through to us by email and we can get them to Liz and Jan after this session as well. I know that Liz would like to end today's session with a beautiful video and share that with us. You might want to give a little bit of an intro to the video, Liz, before you play it, and then after the video we'll wrap up today's session with our final slides. So over to you, Liz.
Well, after doing the education with people years ago, I realised that some of them were coming from the same organisations, like some people from Jewish Care or some people from Participate Australia or Anglicare. So if they came together, that was a good opportunity. But I thought the Dateables dance was a good way for them to meet a whole range of people, and similar to what other people do. So I came up with the idea of the Dateables dance, and both the workshops for meeting people and the dance has been really popular. And a young person wanted to film it for their major work, which led to an ABC segment, but I want to show you the short one with the couple that have been together for over 10 years. So I'll do that now, and thanks for being a part of it.
Thanks.
What do you think about when you think of the word love?
Oh, love. Okay, love is, love is in the air.
People with disabilities have the same range of emotions as everybody else. People on the autism spectrum struggle to express it, but they still experience it.
A friend of ours, whose name is Liz Dore, she was organising for a number of people to meet at a certain location.
I love David very much. He's fun to be with. He is caring and thoughtful and kind. Okay.
It's okay.
Okay.
It's okay.
The Dateables ball was to give people with disability a chance to meet other people, to make friends and hopefully find their match.
It has a scatter of challenges, having Williams syndrome, but there's also some beautiful qualities that she has. One of the most beautiful qualities is her heart.
So I have 4 choices.
She has a beautifully warm heart, and everybody loves Brittany. Everybody warms to her, and she's a gregariously happy person.
Dateables dance is about kids who have disabilities and they meet other people and they have a chat. And yeah, it's good to have a friendship and someone that you can
Doing outings like doing kisses, holding hands, and kissing, and spending time in each other's life.
I've just realised how vital and rewarding and sustaining love is.
Dancers have been terrific. She always enjoys getting dressed up and putting the makeup on and working out what outfit she's going to wear weeks before it's on.
Yeah.
Love is love. isn't it? It doesn't have boundaries. It doesn't, have colour or creed or shape or size. Or so if she falls in love, she's got every right to marry and live her own independent life.
I've worked with people that are depressed or sad or angry, but I've also worked with people who have met someone, and the excitement and the endorphins, that's priceless, that someone can get that through a relationship.
It is very difficult for me to find a job that that pays enough money for me to afford all of Danielle's needs. One thing I noticed on that occasion when the day we discovered we couldn't marry each other is that I fell even more in love with her.
Yes, and I think that's beautiful.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that, Liz. There's so much emotion attached to that video, and I really respect the work that you've done in the space and know that you've made quite significant differences to a lot of people's lives. So we thank you for your commitment to the sector and for all the wonderful, fabulous work that you've done and continue to do.